And I think we are live, mostly alive, somewhat alive.
Looks like it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we're live here. Welcome everyone to another edition of the Spoiler Room, and it is a special. It is a special Over the Hill special. Yes, if you haven't caught Over the Hill specials, basically we are looking at films that are turning 50 like me uh this year. And so I decided to pick a number of movies from 1975, and you fine folks out there did vote for them, and so we picked the top 12, and tonight's movie was one of the ones that got a vote. So tonight we are looking at 1975, A Boy and His Dog, starring he was a very young Don Johnson. A very young Don Johnson. So with me tonight to discuss films is my right hand man. It is none other than Mr. Ian Simmons. How you doing, Ian?
I'm doing great. I'm looking forward to talking about this one because, wow.
As am I, because this was one of those that I had heard about a number of years, after it came out. I just heard talk about it forever, talking about it. And then one day I finally sat down and watched it. I'm like, okay, I wish I would have watched this sooner. This film is definitely something. So thank you for venturing down the stairs, folks, pulling up a chair and popping your favorite drink with us as we talk movie spoilers. And yes, it is A Boy and His Dog. And Ian, Joe is not with us tonight. He is with us in spirit. But would you mind, it's been a while, giving the synopsis of A Boy and His Dog?
I'll just start with, I think I had heard about this movie, or at least heard the title, and I thought it was some cheesy, like Don Johnson in the 70s, like a scruffy dog, and they're like best friends, and it's kind of like, cute and cuddly, like a Disney movie. But, it makes a lot of sense when you're watching the opening credits of this, like based on a short story by Harlan Ellison. I'm like, oh boy. Okay. So
I figured the minute that popped up in the credits, I heard Ian. I literally heard Ian from like 1,000 miles, a couple hundred miles away. I heard him go, oh, being how well read you are, far better read than I am, but yeah.
Well, I've not read the short story, but I have not read a lot of Harlan Ellison, but I know he was a big personality, and at the end of this film, I can see yes, he is the exact kind of person who would write this film. It was adapted by L.Q. Jones, who wrote and directed it, and it takes place in the aftermath of World War IV. That's the thing is, like, usually when we talk about a post-apocalyptic movies, it's World War III takes everything out, but this movie, unlike Six String Samurai, which we talked about last week and I had a lot of problems with, this movie is everything that I wished that movie had been, because they develop a whole lore and timeline and they really commit to the bit. It's still a bit wonky because after the US and Russia or whatever drop a few nukes, there's not going to be a whole lot left, but it does look like a desolate wasteland, this version of America. And you've got Don Johnson playing Vic, who wanders the land with his pet dog Blood, whom he has a psychic connection with. They talk to each other, and Blood is this kind of like a very intelligent, very grumpy and sarcastic dog who all he wants to do is find food, and all Vic wants to do is find women to have sex with. And we come to find out after a little while that the manner in which Vic gets what he wants is not always let's just say it's really frontier justicey, if you want to call it that. Not so much the courting kind of variety, which is unfortunate. They're wandering around, they're scavenging, and through the course of events of this crazy Mad Max style movie, Vic ends up going underground to Down Under, which is not Australia, but it's this crazy world that has been constructed by survivors of the apocalypse who are very wealthy and very like ultra prim proper, I guess you call them conservative, who are trying to recreate the old world, and repopulate the planet, or at least their underground world version of it. But they have some problems in the reproductive cycle, so they have to go above ground to find new young bucks to inseminate. I'll just say it. They're 35 stunning young brides. And I'm sure we'll get into the rest of it, but that's pretty much it. Paradise blown up, paradise found, paradise abandoned. And in the end, it's just about a boy and his dog. Now, I gotta say, I was really with this movie up until we go down under, and then
Mm.
it completely lost me, much in the same manner as a movie I'm gonna be talking about on my show this week, Mickey 17. This is the novel Mickey 7 that was based
Oh,
on. But once they get into the, hey, we're gonna get into an allegory about, 1975 America, I'm like, this is really heavy-handed and really dumb, but I'm glad I stuck with it because this has one of the best and oh my god endings, Mark, that I have ever seen.
this 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 is why this movie became one of those just precious those yeah film that I just visit every so often, and it is literally because the last 2 minutes of this movie, you're right, you get into all this, you get into the down under stuff, which is a little bit more what you might expect from a film like this. Then you get to the last like 2-3 minutes of this film, and you're like, wow. And we'll get to the ending of it for sure. But yeah, the ending has always stuck with me for like ever. I mean, because yeah, this film it became a cult classic. It didn't really. I think it did all right. It won Hugo Awards when it came out. It did win a Hugo Award.
Was it for the screenplay or for the movie?
For the movie.
Okay.
It won Hugo. And well, what's interesting is Harlan Ellison, you're right, is a personality. Um so yeah, the Hugo Award for best science fiction, it was a nominee, and it won best, oh no, yeah, there it is. Hugo Awards, it did win for best dramatic presentation
Okay.
at the Hugo Awards. It won at the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror Films. It was nominated for Best Science Fiction Film, but Don Johnson actually won for Best Actor in of it because yeah. But funny, I was just reading some trivia on this. Usually with the Hugo Awards, when they give it to for Best Dramatic Presentation, they just give it to the director and writer of the screenplay. But Harlan Ellison, being Harlan Ellison, and having won 5 or 6, having won 6, I think, Hugo Awards prior to this for his writings, wanted to be included. And he harassed the Hugo Awards so much that they finally added him. But they didn't have another award, the actual statue to give to him.
Oh
So
no.
they gave him just the base of one of the Hugo Awards. So he would go on to win 2 more after that. And he always, I guess, in an interview like in 2003 or something, said he won 8.5 Hugo Awards.
Oh, I love that.
But I mean, for me, it's funny because Don Johnson, we're talking a young Don Johnson in this
This
film.
is like this is what, 9, 10 years before Miami Vice?
Oh yeah, it'd be well, this was 75, so yeah, about 9 years, I think, before Miami Vice
And
started
and,
up. So
and he's I think he was like 25 around there when he made this
mhm.
movie because he was born in 49. I looked this up
Yeah.
because he's playing 18, um, which he's I guess he's an older looking 18, but I guess everyone would look older if they'd survived World War IV.
Yeah.
But he's just one of those actors like he's on this TV show right now called Dr. Odyssey, where he plays the old captain of this, luxury cruise liner. And
Okay.
then you think about him back in like Miami Vice and then you think about him like this, and then there's also the connection where that's Dakota Johnson's father. It's just so strange to like watch him at a young age thinking about everything that would come after, and he had no idea when he was making this movie.
And that's what's interesting is Dakota Johnson's dad. You don't even you think about it for you're just Johnson because it's such a basic, and then you're just like, oh, okay,
That's Father Madam Web.
that's Father Madam. We have Jason Robards showing up in here. They get some veteran actors for when we get down into the down under. But well, first I first want to talk about Don Johnson because what's funny is when you look at early performances of actors, you're like, okay, it was their early performance. They're like younger actors. Okay, Don Johnson actually does a really good job in this film.
He's great, even when I'd say, especially when the script gets a little bit wonky when they go down under. He does such a great job of establishing this rough and tumble guy who's living in the middle of the wreckage of civilization because it's out in the desert.
Yeah.
They keep referring to down under as being in Topeka. I don't think that was supposed to be Topeka, Kansas.
They say Topeka, but yeah, the geography, it's in Arizona, and so it's supposed to be Phoenix and Topeka. That it was not. Yeah, there's a large space.
The only thing I could think of is like maybe it was supposed to be Topeka, but it had gotten so blown to crap that it was just like rocks and waste. But I buy him, and I love his relationship with the dog, especially because as we find out when he runs into the lovely Quilla June, uh, she witnesses their conversation, but realizes that it's a one-sided conversation because he's talking to himself, and we're never quite sure if this dog is like this irradiated like mutant dog with psychic powers, or if Don Johnson's character has been out, he's just like bored crazy, or he's so desperate for companionship because everyone else is trying to kill him or rob him, that he's found a dog and made it his best friend. It doesn't really matter, and I like that the movie doesn't go out of its way to explain it. It just is what it is. um and also makes the ending that much more messed up.
Well, that's what I love about I mean, it's one of those where you watch it, you're like, okay, it's a gimmick film or whatever. But the minute you get this banter, like right away between Vic, Albert, and Blood, I mean, they waste no time in establishing the relationship between them. It's yes, we are a broken record here on the spoiler room. And I will once again say, this is what I appreciate about some of these older films because they get to the point, they give what it's like. It's the movie's called The Boy and His Dog. We literally establish within the first minute that we meet, literally the first minute we meet these two characters, we get banter between them, and you immediately know the relationship between these two. I mean, it does not take long.
Well, no, it's also a fascinating relationship because the dog is constantly educating Vic, about the history of, how the war started and the chronology of all the battles and the presidents. And so instead of just this exposition dump, I mean, there is a little bit of opening text, but it's not like this big crawl and
Right.
everything, right? It's a great way to introduce the audience to what's going on. And also it's kind of cheeky because they're going through the presidents. It was like Eisenhower, Nixon, Kennedy, Kennedy,
Kennedy.
Kennedy.
Yeah, I forgot that part when I watched it, especially now. I just chuckled. I'm like, oh, that's great. Especially because this took place, I forgot at first that this took place in 2024. So it took place last year. So,
Yes.
there you go. Interesting enough, the dog that was in this was also in a Disney movie, like I think it's My Shaggy Dog or whatnot. It was the same dog. Voice of Blood is Tim McIntyre, who did the music for the movie, and he was also the voice of Blood. And they were thinking of getting a Cagney for the voice, but They didn't get him because they figured his voice was so distinct it would take away from the character.
Mm.
Because you would go, oh, that's Cagney. So they had folks try out, and I guess Tim McIntyre, I believe it said he also did the music on it, but yeah, he was the voice of Blood, and I loved. You're right. You're the only explanation we get for the connection between Vic and Blood. Vic drops a line at one point that Blood had been with him since he was a kid. Since he was pretty much, as he says, since he's pretty much born, Blood's been with him and he's been able to talk to Blood. Now, like you said, he could be telepathic with Blood and we could have the talking dog, or because it's the wasteland and there's not a lot of kids to play with, most of the kids will just beat the other kids up for their clothes or whatnot. He may have made it up and the dog just listens to him, like dogs do, and he's making up the dialogue in his
It's his dog. His pet is also his imaginary friend.
yeah.
Yeah, it's the other thing is like when I saw that Jason Robards was in the movie, I didn't know what part he played. I
Mm.
almost thought he was the voice of the dog
Oh,
because
sure.
the voices are very similar, especially because of
Mm.
the 1975 technology. It sounds like someone's talking into a speaker, like just off the screen. It's not the smoothest, but you get the point.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it's again, I can't get over how wild this movie is. I like to think that what happened was because the dogs are not that dissimilar looking. You know how in Back to the Future when Doc sends Einstein in the DeLorean for like 2 minutes back through time? I like I'm thinking this is like Back to the Future 1.5. This is what happened in that little time period there. It just lasted for, 20 years or something and came
Sure.
back.
Sure, yeah, that this could be Einstein, you bet. Who knows? But yeah, when this film opens, it's like we establish pretty quickly what kind of wasteland it is, literally a wasteland, and how male dominant wasteland it is, because literally Vic and Blood come upon some rovers, which they call them, which are just roaming gangs, and they busted into a home, and we catch the aftermath of them leaving after they've done some horrible things to a female occupant of a home. And that's what one of the things I found interesting is that all the buildings are under like 15 feet of dirt in the wasteland because of the war. Because funny you mentioned the intro, because that was actually added in the 82 release of the film.
Hmm.
They added that so that it would help establish the world that it's taking place in, but it wasn't in the original, I guess, release of it. But yeah, everything on top looks like Salt Lake City, like Salt Lake. I mean, so all the buildings and everything are underneath, and we're talking like underneath,
And it's crazy because they go into even before they get to down under, there's that whole fight sequence in the underground, like a
School, I think.
warehouse or a school or something
Yeah,
like that. Like it made me wonder if this was, I don't know what happened because it seems unfathomable that people would build this after an apocalypse.
right.
So I don't know. They don't, again, it's something they don't quite explain. If you think about it too much afterwards, you could drive yourself crazy. But you buy into it. What really creeped me out, and it really sets the tone for what kind of movie this is going to be, and even kind of sets up the ending. Um, when that group of marauders leaves the underground dwelling and Vic and Blood are kind of waiting off in the distance. They're not exactly hiding, which is kind of interesting. It speaks to the society. Like there are horrible things going on, and you don't have to necessarily hide like duck behind an old car. You can just kind of stand far enough away and watch to know so that the marauders know that you're not going to necessarily mess with them. And that's what they did. But one of the marauders, as they're leaving, distinctly the voice of a little kid,
Yeah,
and they said, and this is before you know what's in the bunker. You kind of
right.
have an idea of what they were doing, but the little kid is running away says, "Did you see her jerk when I cut her?"
Yeah,
I'm like, Oh goodness. And
This
then
movie's dark. This movie is so dark. It may just seem like a kind of a comedic gimmick with between, with the conversations between Blood and Vic, but the world that this is dark. And what's interesting about it is our quote unquote hero, Don Johnson, his character Vic. Vic has grown up into this world, and this isn't like we get. That's what I love about this movie is that our guy isn't an enlightened character. Usually you get like, some of the other Wasteland films or whatnot that you get that the character is got a moral code, has, is the most straight laced out of the wild folk that are out there, has tried to live kind of a by a code. Vic is an 18-year-old kid who's grown up and known nothing but this world and acts like a person who's grown up in this world. The only person that's kind of kept him from really being a rover is Blood. He's got a conscience. Blood is kind of not fully his like don't do that, but at the same time he gives him some other alternatives or going, here's the consequence of what's going to happen if you do this.
right. And I don't know. Did they explain why Vic has two names, Albert and Vic? I missed that.
No,
Because for the first half the movie, Blood refers to Don Johnson as Albert, and occasionally he'll slip in Vic, and then like later on, he's mostly
Right.
referred to as Vic with Quilla June.
Well, and Vic doesn't like being called Albert, and they never explain it. Again, the joys of these older films, they only have so much time. They aren't going to go into this whole flashback of where he came from or whatnot. We just hear that, he had parents and he rather be called Vic than Albert. What I kind of picked was Albert was maybe his actual given name, and he'd prefer Vic because Albert isn't really cool.
I was just gonna say that it's probably like Albert Victor, whatever his last name would be, and he's like, just call me Vic. It's tougher. But I mean, at one point, so okay, it's dark when the little kid says that line,
Yeah.
but then they go down into the bunker. They find the dead husband, I guess, and the cut up body of the woman, like just flop fully naked on a table. I mean, I don't know what this was rated back in the day. It's the 70s, so it might have been G.
They wanted to rate it PG, but they went back and the filmmaker actually said, yeah, no, this is R. What are you talking about?
Yeah. But Vic's reaction, or Albert, because he's Albert at this point,
Yeah.
he says he's not cut up about it, but he says, hell, they didn't have to cut her. She could have been used 3 or 4 more times.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the dog says, and this is 10 minutes into the movie, and it just sets everything up. Blood says, you're not a nice person, Albert. You're not a nice person at all. And it's not said like kind of a funny da 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 da. It's like he's condemning this guy. And it's even more crazy if you think, what if this is all in Albert's head and it's his conscience or whatever, just trying to deal with this madness? Because you're right. He's 18. He grew up in this world, but he grew up in a world that had essentially ended decades before he was even born. So there's no like wise older figure to say, well, I remember in the before times we used to, treat women nicely and and shake hands and yeah.
Well, that's what I mean is it's an interesting take because later on when we would get the later apocalypse films that this film definitely had some influences on. I mean, Miller has come out and said that this film directly influenced Mad Max.
Oh yeah, I got very angry at George Miller a couple of times watching this. Angry is the wrong word, but I'm like, aha.
Disappointed or something?
Not even disappointed. It's just I mentioned last week during Six String Samurai that Patton Oswalt joke about how he talks about Mad Max and film critics, some hated it when it came out because they're like, it's the end of the world. People are all driving around in cars except there's no gasoline. I'm like, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. But you kind of go with it. In this movie, which came out years before Mad Max, obviously. There is a car, and it's being driven by slaves. They're pushing it and pulling it around the desert, and there's like the leader on top of it,
Yeah.
and then later, or you realize that what's on this car? There's a guy, and he's got a guitar. And you think of Mad Max Fury Road, the giant caravan thing with the musical instruments. I'm like, my God, it's all here.
It is. It is. And if you're a fan of the Fallout games, this film had a direct impact and influence on the Fallout games as well. If you play those at all, you can definitely see. And in fact, the dog in the Fallout games is, I think, what's he called? Meatbag or whatnot. I think that's what it is. Anyway, it's a nickname, and it's a nickname Vic at one point insults Blood and calls him. Uh,
Yeah, that's right.
yeah,
Meatbag.
so, I mean, this film became a cult hit, definitely, to where you can see so many influences for your more I won't say modern, but your later Wasteland films took a lot from here, especially, like, the societal structure. Like, in this, people are always digging for food, and in fact, the scene where you're talking about where the guy has got the band of rovers that pull his truck, and then they stop by where a house is, and they dig, and they start getting a lot of supplies. And Vic, again, our supposed hero, waits and waits and makes this very not intelligent move to go rob them in broad daylight while they're down in this hole. And he runs, and of course they take shots at him, and he kills one of the guys, and he starts running. And I love this about this older gentleman who's obviously got some power over these people or what I control. He just laughs and says, let him go. He's like, mad props to it. He's like, he's got respect for him and for having the balls to steal from him. He's like, don't come back. But hey, you got away. I'm not going to chase you. We got more stuff here. But it's just this weird, interesting establishment of rules in this world that he has is just wild. Yet you're like, yeah, when you say World War IV, there is no remnant really of old established civilization. You don't have pretty much anybody, at least on the surface, like you said, going, oh, back in the day, we didn't do this sort of thing. There was a code or what. Nah. It's
Yeah, I mean, they're the only, I guess, remnants of a civilization really is, there are these kind of little ramshackle, not even towns. They're just more like not even outposts.
outposts.
They're just
Not
kind
even,
of like
yeah.
right, where you can go and kind of get entertainment. There's a lady who, again, this is sort of the kind of mirrored in the end of the film, but they come across this little outpost, and there's a lady there who will sleep with, guys or whatever for, I guess, money or bartering of
Food.
some
It's
kind.
food. Yeah, it's
Is
food.
it food? Okay.
Yeah.
But there's like you notice that one guy's getting up and zipping up his pants as he comes out of the little pit that she's in. And there's a long line of guys,
Mhm.
waiting for their turn, which we see later, but it's, Vic is the, the madam, so to speak. But, he has to check his gun with the guy at the outpost. And there's a line. What does he say? It
It was
was
about
such a good.
rust.
Yes. Oh, he said so Vic gives over his rifle to this kid to watch as he goes to the outpost, and he says, "If it picks up one rust spot, you're going to wake up with a crowd around you." Wow. That's a great line.
It is. It is. I sat there and I was like, my brain's trying to wrap around exactly what that means, but you're not really supposed to, but it just sounds like such a an awesome threat line. It's just like,
Yeah, you're going to wake up dead.
yeah.
But you're essentially going to be watching your your own body from above. Yeah, it's wonderful. But yeah, they go. There are pockets of, and this is very hard to pull off, and I don't know that this movie necessarily does it that well, but I give them props for trying because it's an early example of it. But it's where you're trying to show the everyday boredom of people in a
Right.
helpless situation. So Vic and Blood, they go and they sit down to watch a movie, and it's like these little stag like nudie shows that somehow they have a, a TV or projector or something
They
that's
have
working,
project
and
it's an old film projector, it looked like, so, yeah.
but it looked like it was almost on a monitor somehow. It
Mhm.
wasn't like cloth or something or a screen. It was like
Yeah.
on a piece of hardware. But so they're watching this, it's like really bad quality. And the people who are watching this film, they're all sitting in a mismatch of old chairs. The production design in this movie is off the fucking chain. I mean, they, even if it's just like, we'll just scrounge some garage sales and, put some
Yeah.
fake dust on them or something, it does look like leftover society. It's beautiful. But this scene where they're just like sitting there watching it and talking about popcorn and, ooh, I think I smell a girl around here. Let's go look for her. Okay, let's not. Let's just watch some more movies. It feels like that goes on for like 20 minutes. It doesn't really, but it's a long time. And it's really selling the idea of like, yeah, this is kind of just what they do. They survive, they satisfy their base instincts, and, just go on to the
Well,
next place.
and that's why I like that scene. While it is the probably the slowest moments in the film, it does establish, as you said, the monotony of most of people's lives in this wasteland. Like they're just like you almost get the idea these people you pay your fee to get into this little gathering, this little outpost, whatever you want to call it, little gathering of civilization, little blip of civilization. And you get the feeling these people just, once they paid their admission, they've just been hanging out here.
Yeah.
Occasionally go out and maybe get more food so they have something to barter with, but not often. But mostly they've just this is all they have to do is stare. And I mean, and I kind of get a kick out of the fact that they're nudie films that they're playing, these kind of older looking nudie films, because no one there is watching the nudie films for like a any purpose whatsoever than to watch something versus staring at dust all day. I mean, there there's not a single person like leering or be like, hey, hey, they don't you don't get any of that scenes. Everybody, there's most of them aren't look bored as fuck. And yet they're just like,
You know what? They're bored. It's a distraction, but it's also got to be kind of depressing because you got to think these movies are ancient to them, but they were from a time when you had a studio and a camera and actors and luxuries like, hey, let's make a movie to titillate audiences. Back when they had a world to to hang out and be entertained by. There's so much going on. It really makes me want to read the Harlan Ellison story this was based on.
yeah, well, and more so even again, the way the storytelling is stuff that I think I will say it gets lost with some other genre films later on that they've made nowadays, in the fact of we don't get like backstory flashbacks of our Vic character, but just as follow them on this journey, not only is he talking with the dog, which you wonder if it's internal or if the dog actually is telepathic, but you realize Vic does come from, not to say well-to-do family, but family that taught him more things than some other people had taught him in the wasteland, because he knew how to read. Because you get that
Mm.
one scene when he comes in for trading the food, and he trades his food. He's got sardines, so they let him in, and then the runner of this place goes, well, what about the dog? And so he makes it difficult at first. Vic kind of makes it like this is a hard sell, and then he throws him a can, and the guy looks at it, goes, what are these? And he pauses and he goes, peaches. And they got this shot, and it says beets on the can. And he goes, what am I supposed to do with these? He's like, well, they're peaches. Can't you read what's on the can? And the guy, he knows he can't. And I love that. I'm like sitting here going, okay, while his behavior and moral code and everything have been established by this wasteland, he's got some smarts to him.
Yeah,
you know.
he's I'm not going to say he's very smart, but he's smart enough,
Right.
and he's very resourceful. And it's one of those things where if he didn't look like a hunky young Don Johnson, but if he looked like one of the other guys that was sitting, like the extras sitting in the nudie theater,
Right.
would we think about him the same way? Because if you just look at his actions throughout the entire film, he is kind of a monster.
He is.
And
Yeah.
if you think of like, oh, it's if it was one of those, barbarian guys
Hmm.
in the wasteland who's talking to his dog, you'd be like, oh, this guy's a complete psychopath, and I don't want to watch this movie anymore. But it's Don Johnson. He's very handsome. He's very
Yeah.
likable in his own kind of way. He's got this kind of a Han Solo kind of a thing going on. But yeah, when he at one point he does go down into this very cavernous kind of, like you called it, a school, and
Yeah.
he goes into like a locker room and he finds this woman kind of in the shadows, and he secrets himself away and watches her, undress and then get dressed, and he goes and he attacks her, and he means to, do things to her to satisfy his own urges, and she starts talking to him. It's so great about Don Johnson's performance here, because he just wants to get down to business. He doesn't feel good about it, but he knows that he's not thinking with his main head. But she starts talking to him and just like asking him kind of about himself and like his name, and she tells him her name or something, and you can tell he's like, just he keeps shaking his head like, just stop. I don't want to know anything about you. I just want to get this over with so I can leave. And they forge some kind of a connection like within this, 2 minutes. And then of course more bad guys come, and there's like a shootout and a standoff, and these two end up together with the dog, kind of like, well, there's that whole sex montage where I guess they just hole up and have sex for days before they decide
Which
to go down under.
Blood
Wow.
is hilarious during that time. That's the thing is you have the romantical bit. There's one scene in here where they kind of, after they've defeated the bad guys, now they've connected, and they've bonded, and now they're kind of into each other, and they have kind of a soft lens and romance scene for a moment. But we get only maybe a minute beat of that at most. We do get his struggle with a bra, which is hilarious. And that common trope for so many years. But then blood is just just like, so like, compilation is disgusting. And then he's sitting there, and then they fade away, and then they fade back, and he's lying on his back, and there's still movement going on, and he's so disgusting. They totally take the air out of this romantic scene, you know. And I think, again, that's where it plays in. Is blood his conscious, or an actual talking dog? It doesn't really matter, but it is interesting because as she's talking to him, blood warns him about the rovers coming, and it's like, okay, did he get you sit there and you go, is he stopping himself? Because like you said, he's like, no, no, don't tell me your name. I don't want. No, you're supposed to just, like, be scared. We do the thing, and then I get to leave. And now you're talking. Why are you talking to me?
Yeah, and again, like, the relationship is very complicated because as we come to find out, she's not, completely helpless. She's actually an agent of the people underground, and she's got her own kind of agenda. So you never quite know what the extent to any feelings that she actually has for him, or that
Right.
he has for her. It is very much a contractual kind of thing, which checks out because,
Mhm.
after civilization is wrecked, do people have any sense of what romance even is, or does it just go back to the base instincts of, reproduction or good feelings, eating and not dying?
And oh my Lord, just talking to you right now, and this is why I love doing podcasting for so long. I just made a connection. I can't believe I didn't, between the society down under and the society on the surface. Because, yeah, And I love bookends, how it brings it around. There's a scene early on in the film where we just see the feet of folks with very nice pants, and they're talking about, oh yeah, we've been following him for a while. I think that's our guy, basically, enable, the pie or whatever they call it or whatnot, you know, and then that's right at the beginning. You forget about that for a while. Then you realize they've been following Vic for a while. The Down Under wants him because he's a virile man in the wasteland and is becoming in demand, which will come up again in a film we're going to look at a couple weeks from now, in Hell Comes to Frogtown. So again, another influence. But, so that's why they use her basically as the lure to get him down into the Down Under. And now what's funny is we get in the Down Under, and this isn't a society that is like the remnants of the last civilization before everything went completely annihilated. This is a society that is trapped from the beginning of World War III, which we were told started in the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
So this isn't even like the 70s culture trapped in, because it probably would have been cooler. It probably would have just been, everybody would have been more laid back. There would have been underground hemp fields under ultraviolet lights for like miles. And, it would have been a lot cooler. There would have been disco, but no, this is basically 50s trapped. So again, another Fallout kind of feel, influence.
And also Six String Samurai.
And Six String Samurai. But where I was going with this, sorry for the long trip, too late. In this one, we have people who are sitting this time in pews, bored. Almost exactly the same boredom a lot of them have as those guys up on the surface who were watching nudie films. We have some people in this courthouse who are watching the trial by the committee, which is a committee of three, a trinity, so to speak, but they're passing judgment on folks who have been breaking their laws down in their society. And people are in there watching it, and they're bored. They look just like the folks that were upstairs watching the nudie movie.
Right. And there's
excited people too, but I mean, the people that,
right, but the people that are bored in the courthouse, you kind of get the feeling that that's the only like emotion that they can register.
Right.
Because what they're watching is very horrific. You've got people who, for the crime of talking back or not respecting authority, or very nebulous things, they're sent to the farm. Now this is something I missed. I assume being sent to the farm means, I don't know if that just means being killed, or if they're being killed and like recycled for food for the rest of the population, or what, like a Soylent Green type of situation. But it's not good. But I wondered if they were just so used to being in this mode where they can't say anything, they have to be there.
Right.
They're just, but yeah, that's a great parallel with the people up top. But the people up top are more free and sort of in a better position than the people who are down below and have the conveniences of like, finger sandwiches.
Yeah, because the people down under are held to a very strict, I mean, it's the 50s on steroids. Take conservative 50 lifestyle and just like put it on steroids. That is their rule book, to where you have to curtsy, and there's certain manners you have to do when you see certain people, and you better address them the right way, and you better dress the right way. And and the committee has taken control, and they control everything in here. They're like the leaders, in the vault, to where they're deciding who's going to get married to who. They're the ones that are passing judgment. They're judge, jury, and executioner. Jason Robarbs is the one who plays the I guess the leader of the three, the most leader. He's the one that's usually passing, and even his judgments are so lackluster in most of his decisions. It's just like he's reading him off because there's a protocol, but if he had the chance, he wouldn't even give a reason. He'd just say, yeah, take him away to the farm. And yeah, the farm is a place where people are killed. I think it's implied that it's cannibalism, but they don't exactly say it for sure, or they're processed into, because they have water and electricity and such, and they have a lot of fruits and vegetables in that they grow. So, they may be just used as fertilizer. But they're talking about the first couple we meet, like you said, they were rude, they were, misconduct, and they had a lack of decorum or something. There's like three reasons that Lou, who's played by Jason Robarbs, who's the main guy, just kind of rattles off, like even under his breath, like, yeah, this, and this. Okay, send them to the farm. And then they were talking about, well, what's going to be their cause of death? Cancer? No. It'll be an accident, or it'll be a heart attack. That's what it is, a heart attack. We'll just say heart attacks. The priest will perform the eulogy, and we'll take care of that. It's like, but they control everything in this society.
And that's why this whole stretch of movie lost me very
Sure.
quickly, because I felt like they were trying to do too much. It felt like they were trying to say something but didn't quite know what they wanted to say. And it was just piling on, right? Because everybody in the town wears like white pancake makeup with rosy cheeks and like the line to denote
Yeah.
like kind of like wearing a mask. And I'm like, yeah, I could see. So I'd be like, yeah, man, we all wear masks. It was like the conservative 50s or whatever, man. Everyone's like lily white and rosy cheeked. I'm like, yeah, let's go. If you're gonna do that, you can't be ham-handed with the satire. You gotta actually say something and be a little bit smarter than that. But also you start to wonder, it's the Mad Max problem about the gasoline. You're like, okay, so they're concerned about not having enough people in their society to keep their society going. And yet it sounds like they're killing a lot of people on this farm. So
They
what
are.
are you doing?
Their judgment, almost every judgment is like, send them to the farm. It's like every group of, it's like, send them to the farm. It's like,
Yeah.
holy crap.
And then on top of it, like there's some interesting things, like when they're so far down underground, uh, that they've got parks with trees and rolling hills. It's almost like being in the middle of that Genesis project from Star Trek
Yeah.
2. But it's always night, and they're like, oh, it's 10:15 a.m., but it's like this black sky, because you realize it's not really sky, it's just underground. Um, but then you find out they've got this one guy, Michael, who's their big enforcer, and when he goes after people, like we see him grab people and like literally just crush their faces, and they start bleeding out of the mouth and nose and ears. And he's very powerful to the point where he starts chasing Vic and Quilla June, and Vic turns around and starts shooting with the shotgun. And you're like, okay, this guy has been an ace shot throughout the movie, like taking out people left and right from near and far, and he can't seem to shoot this guy. Like, what is going on? Is he a damn robot? And they're like, yeah, it
Yeah,
turns out
he's
he's a
a
damn
damn
robot. I'm like,
robot.
wait, now you're introducing cyborgs? Come on, movie, stop. Just stop. Let's get
Well,
back above ground. The thing is, the movie stops being good when it stops being about a boy and his dog.
dog.
And
Yeah.
then what happens when we get back up to the top and he's reunited with the dog? Then the movie becomes awesome in the last 3 minutes.
Yes. Yeah. Well, no, I did like the down under part, because again, there's a lot of unspoken parts, and I'm sure it's probably explored better in the story that Harlan Ellison wrote. And they only have so much time in here, because again, we are talking probably a lower, but well, we're talking a lower budget film that you're shooting on film. So you only have so much film, because film's expensive. And so they got to tell their story fairly quickly. This film is not that long. But the part down under, it by introducing, what I did like, the reason for introducing the robot though, is shows you that, okay, this society down under isn't a society that's like trapped in the 50s. This is a society that has been structured to be in the 50s, and they aren't that primitive, of like 50s primitive. They do have the other technology there, but it's almost like the committee keeps it under wraps from the rest of the people.
Yeah, and that's the problem, is
Mhm.
because you start thinking about this, and that's way too sophisticated for an organization that has survived two world wars at this point,
Yeah.
because you're not going to have manufacturing plants turning out, or robotics and advanced engineering research happening in an underground, park. I mean, we don't get a
Right.
full look at what the place is, but you can't imagine, okay, how the hell did they come out with this robot? It's like you either go down there and it's an advanced civilization that they kind of cobbled together and you spend time with it, or it's something that's very much a throwback to the 1950s, and then at the very end, like, oh yeah, and now they've also got these sophisticated, cyborg killing machines. It's way too much. It
I
happens it happens right as they're leaving this place. You're like,
Yeah.
what the fuck? What?
Well, and then I did like the whole part with Quilla June Holmes, played by Susanna Benton, who didn't have too many roles after this. But I loved the idea that there's this suddenly, you're right. When he goes down under, we're suddenly compact into so many storylines that we would see later in other films, just those threads later on, because not only do you have this idea of, oh, Vic's a virile guy and they're going to milk him, which they literally do, for, literally. But then you get this like side, I'll say side quest, this subplot that Quilla Joan only went up to the surface to lure Vic so she could get in good with the committee because she wanted to be on the committee. And so and when the committee doesn't put her on the committee, she decides to free Vic so Vic will kill them. So she and her younger crew can take over the committee.
Again, yeah. And again, that's great as the plot of a movie. But
Right.
when you're just introducing these things in the last 15 minutes of your movie, especially when she's with this guy named Gary, who is going to be one of her co-committee,
Yeah.
members or something in this new world order. But Gary and his friend, at the end, when the committee, the triumvirate, is set up in this park, and you've got Michael there, and they're passing judgment on all the people that are the revolutionaries, the traitors. Gary and his friend are like literally sitting
I know.
like 10 feet away and just like sitting there, like, well, I guess they just passed judgment on us. Hey, look, this Michael guy is coming over to us. Oh, look, he's killing us. Like, what?
Yeah.
Again, what the hell is going on?
Yeah, the land down under is an odd turn, and they pack a lot, and makes me wonder if that there's more of that in the book, the novella that he wrote. And I suspect there is, because it just has that feeling, and it's almost like, wow, you put a lot. But yeah, so then when the revolution doesn't happen with our young folks wanting to take over the committee, she tries to play to Vic's hormones and say, oh, I love you, and I'll do the things. Remember the warehouse? I'll do the things with you if we get out of here now. So they get to the surface, and Blood was hurt during the warehouse attack or school attack, whichever you want to call it.
Oh, we got to go back and talk about that, because was this before they had the no animals were harmed in the making this movie disclaimers? Because when Blood fights that other dog, that looked like a real damn dog fight, and
it,
I got uncomfortable watching that shit.
I got uncomfortable because I forgot the dog fight part in the warehouse. But when they did do the dog fight, they trimmed the dog's nails and they put muzzles on them. They just shot it. That's the way they shot it, so you didn't see it. But they had muzzles on them, and they didn't have they trimmed their nails so at least they wouldn't scratch each other. But they went after each other, and they go after each other. That fight's as intense, if not more, than the people shooting at each other.
Well, right, and the aftermath, it's kind of hard to tell how vicious a fight it is, because you see them like doing that standing thing where they're kind of like
Yeah.
bear wrestling with each other. But at the end, because Vic, I think he he beats the other
He
dog
beats
to
the
death,
dog, yeah.
right? But then when we see what happens to Blood, he is literally a bloody mess. He looks
Yeah.
cut up. His hair is all matted down. It's a fantastic job on the part of whoever did. Is that the
Makeup?
makeup department?
Yeah,
I
it'd
don't know
be
who
the
does
makeup.
that,
It would be the
right?
makeup, yeah.
But you're like, oh my god, this poor dog. He looks terrible. And at the end of the movie, when they come back from the underground, they find him, and he still looks like he's on death's door.
and he hasn't eaten, and he's been up there for a few days at
Yeah.
least while Vic was underground. So he isn't doing well. He's got his injuries, and he talks about being hungry. At this point, Quilla Jones, and we're setting this whole ending up because the ending of this film, if you ever want to take a film to where it starts out good, it starts to fall apart a little, but showing if you nail that landing, like in gymnastics, you're going to get a better score. Very end, Quilla has decided, okay, I'm going to stick with Vic because I've screwed my chances down in paradise or whatever. They're going to possibly go to this place over the hill, as they say. Hey, over the hill. And they're gonna, what a coincidence. I didn't even plan it that way. They're going to go there where there's supposedly fresh land where people are farming and everything. That's what Blood has been telling Vic, that there's this land that they're going to. But only Blood knows how to get there. But he's laying on death's door. So Quilla is like sitting there, and she sees Vic just torn up about his dog dying, because you find out that, yeah, he truly loves his dog buddy, and he doesn't want him to die. And she's like, well, maybe it's better if he does die. I'll love you. It'll be us. Look, and he's like starving. And then we fade to black. And this is directed by an actor who only did one other feature film before this, and then he did like one episode of a show, but he did acting. But the ending
he was in the Wild Bunch,
yeah, he was in the Wild Bunch. But he does this beautiful ending to where very end we come up and we hear Vic and Blood talking, and Blood sounds kind of happy. It sounds like he's had some food. He goes, "Yeah, I have enough," and they walk off, and as they're walking away, Blood drops probably one of the best final lines in a film.
She had marvelous judgment, if not particularly good taste.
And then they chuckle about good taste. And she's not in the picture at all.
Well, she is, because this is why I rented this off of Hoopla, which is basically the public library digital streaming service out here. And this is why I hope that there's never like a really great digital restoration, because that last shot, it's kind of hard to see. When it fades to black and then it comes up, we can see the remnants of a fire, and we see the vague outline of something on a spit.
Right.
And then we see Blood and Vic kind of like getting ready to walk away, into the night, and you just get a glimpse of the tattered wedding dress that
because
Quilla was in, and there's a bit of it that's wrapped around Blood.
I didn't I didn't catch that the first few times I watched this. I love the ending. I was waiting for the final line, and whatnot, but watching it this time specifically for the show, I'm like, wait, is this parts of the dress? I'm like, oh, he dressed Blood's wounds. That looks like a familiar dress that quit. Oh, so they give away the last line before they actually give the last.
And they walk off just like chuckling at that last line. And what it reminded me of is it's almost the exact ending of Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, which came out, I think, 10 years after this, where Henry and his girlfriend, after they, kill her brother, they're like, we love each other. We're just going to leave town. And then the last shot is the car pulls over to the side of the road, and Henry gets out, and he leaves the suitcase by the side of the road, and it zooms in on the suitcase like, wait a second, is that blonde hair sticking out of the cracks in the case? And then he just drives off like, wow. But yeah, Boy and His Dog did it 10 years earlier and arguably better.
It's just the ending of this really shows you nailing the landing really helps, kind of strengthen your film, because the middle part under, you get that part and you're like, okay, I like it. I get what you're going for. I like the bizarreness, but where is this going to go? And then you get that ending though, and it ends with a boy and his dog, for where we say, and I love the other line too, where Blood says it there. He's like, before we get to over the hill, you're probably going to have to cook up the rest of that. He doesn't say what.
Yeah,
He just says, "Are you going to be okay with that?" That's what he asks. He goes, "Are you going to be okay cooking up the rest of that?"
right. And you're like, oh my god, he's got the rest of her like in his backpack.
I
Ugh.
know. So yeah, a boy and his dog. I'm glad you got a kick out of it because I get a kick out of this film every time I watch it. And being 1975, yes, 50 years old, but being, I guess you could consider it one of the first like major post-apocalyptic films to be released, just as that was coming in, becoming a bigger genre. You see so much in this film that has cropped up later on in other films and, like I said, video games. It's like, yeah.
Well, and that's, maybe the answer to the question I'm about to ask is because it's so dark and the main character is so ultimately irredeemable, but why the hell isn't this a bigger movie? Like, why didn't this become Mad Max? I mean, I know there's not really room for a trilogy, but I mean, it's a half a century old and it is better than a lot of the movies that came after it. It's certainly bolder.
Oh, it is definitely bold. I mean, especially the take on it. If you watch it today as well with our through our 2025 eyes, you look at it as just how like male dominant and chauvinist the world has become over since World War IV. There are actually a fairly why you have the dog looking for females because there's actually very few females left on Earth. You get the impression of as well. They're all down under. The down under has been, but yeah, but it's still one of those films where apparently he did try to do a sequel. It never came to be. They wrote a script, but it never was able to get funding. A girl and his dog and her dog, apparently it was supposed to be. And I think Blood, they were going to do the sequel, but unfortunately, a few years after this film, Blood died. And so then they couldn't do the sequel because it was going to involve blood again, I guess. I'm not sure that the teleplay apparently was published or whatnot later on, like 10 years or 15 years ago, apparently. I didn't get a chance to dig further into it, but there was a sequel planned by, I believe Ellison had one planned and wrote something about it, like at the teleplay for it or whatnot. But yeah, it never came to be because he could never get the funding, and they lost the dog that would have been Blood, who would have been the carryover character. Which that's interesting. That just piqued my curiosity. I'm like, oh wait, so that was going to be Blood? Oh, okay. Yeah.
I, I haven't read the script either, but I don't mind that they didn't do a sequel because especially if Blood's a carryover character, then you kind of answer that question like, oh, I guess he really was a psychic dog, and
Right. Yeah. No. I like the bit more of the mystery and the enigma left behind. Uh, with this rather than a sequel. It is definitely a stronger film on its own, just by itself. This cult film that is a really dark story, but at the same time, so influential. You could just see the influences permeate throughout. you know, and the film apparently took 5 years to get made from start to finish. Yeah, so
wow.
it took a while to do that. Yeah, let's see. I was just looking up, seeing if I could find something quick for the sequel that it was going to come out with, but um, yeah. Oh, the Shaggy DA. That's who the dog who plays Blood was in before. He was in the Shaggy DA. So a year later. So there you go. Um, yeah, but Boy and His Dog. So I'm glad you enjoyed it, Ian. I'm glad.
We've talked about this a little bit here tonight, but it is one of those things where this movie started off as like a 5-star movie,
Yeah.
and then it quickly dipped down into, okay, I'll give this like 2 because
Sure.
that Down
Mhm.
Under took a lot of the energy out of
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
But then the ending, it's 4.5, four
Yeah.
and a half
It
stars for this damn
boosts it.
movie.
The ending really boosts it back up, and it really helps summarize the film in general. And yeah, for me too, it was like the ending. The ending has always stuck with me. That it just was one of those things where, wow, that's how you end something like this to make it keep it memorable. It's just that ending because it doesn't go exactly how you would think, but it's within the context of the movie, it made sense.
Yeah, it's I'm reading The Mist right now, the Stephen King short story,
Yeah.
and it ends different from the film, but the movie version is another one of those, like, I can't believe they went there, especially in a big mainstream kind of blockbuster horror movie.
Oh, that ending destroys me every time. I'm just like being a parent too. It just the way that whole ending for The Mist ends up. I'm like, yeah, it's a great ending, and I don't mean great as in feel good ending, but a great as in just emotional gut
The thing that
punch.
always stood out about that was the fact the little boy wakes up right before it happens. You see
Yeah.
that look on his face like,
Yeah, and then the mist clears and the truck shows up literally a minute after that happens. It's like, oh fuck me. Oh my, and the church people that he conflicted with that told him not to go were on the truck of rescue. It's just like, oh my god. Oh,
"Yep."
that ending so destroyed me the very first time I watched it. I was just like, oh shit, I gotta go watch Care Bears or something because fuck. So yeah, Boy Does Dog. There you go, folks. Very interesting film, one that I think you should watch. It holds up because there's no CGI. This film really just everything's practical in it. It's wild, and if you're a fan at all of anything we mentioned tonight that got influenced, you should see where those influences come from, because you will watch this and go, just like Leonardo DiCaprio, oh, you're gonna watch it, you're going like, oh. So
Yeah.
now what we will be doing, of because it is an Over the Hill special, we are going to determine what April films are going to be. So we are going to spin the wheel of random and see what our theme is going to be for a next month. Going
Woo!
around, going around. Round table,
Round
which
table.
means folks are going to need to go out and find themselves a shrubbery as we take a look at films involving King Arthur. Now, the Over the Hill film for next month means it will be Monty Python and the Holy Grail. So that's going to
Nice.
be our Over the Hill special next month. The films we will be watching with that will be Excalibur from 1981, King Arthur from 2004, and Camelot from 1967. So those are the films we will be watching next month for the Round Table month.
I can't wait. The only one of those that I've seen, excuse me, is, oh my gosh, why c the first one? I'm totally
Monty
blanking, I'm
Python?
tired. Monty Python, The Holy Grail, yeah. I kept wanting to say Spamalot.
Spamalot. No, that's the musical. That's the
Right, right, right.
Tony winning musical.
Yeah, but I've only seen Holy Grail once in its entirety, and, it was an excruciating experience because I
Oh
saw it
no.
at the Music Box at a midnight movie, which was a terrible mistake because
For
all
your
you're
first
getting.
viewing, yeah, because everybody's going to be quoting it and hooping and how, yeah.
Yep. So I'm looking forward to watching it in the comfort of my own home without any obnoxious people other than myself.
Well, yeah, so that's what we have to look forward to next month, folks. That's exciting. That was fun putting that theme together. So, next month is going to be the round table. So, this is where we always give our license to shill to our guest host. Well, not guest host, my co-host, my crew member, my fellow crew member, Ian. The floor is yours. Shill away, please.
Thank you. I'm Ian Simmons. I run Kicking the Seat, which you can find at kickseat.com and also right here on YouTube. We do interviews and movie roundtables and all sorts of fun stuff. And this Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Central, you can join us for a live stream of it's a review of the latest Bong Joon-ho film, Mickey 17. So what did I think of Mickey 17? Well, tune in and find out. I promise you, as is evidenced here, Mark, here's the problem. I only talk about movies I like on your show. And so anybody just watching, kicking the seat might think this guy does not actually like movies. I'm convinced. So, yeah.
Well, you are the last guy anyone should be asking an opinion of, right? Is that
Yeah,
what you
that's my
think?
whole deal.
That's your whole deal. So who knows? But yes, tune in for that, folks. Make sure you subscribe, like, and all his stuff. And if you're at all interested, specialmarkproductions.com for all your Movie Man needs. Look for it soon. If you caught our page, if you're on our Patreon, you will hear our before conversation before the show, the after hours discussion, which is before the show. Long story. Don't worry about it. But where we talk about mostly my weekend at the Midwest Weird Fest / A Night of Horror International Film Festival this past weekend in Eau Claire, where I watched a lot of films, interviewed a lot of filmmakers, and all of that will be on the channel within the next 2 to 3 weeks for me to edit and record all of that. So look forward to that as well. I've got a couple interviews that I'll be doing this week that'll be showing up later as well. 3, possibly more. So there's a lot going on. So check out that all on the YouTube channel here, where you can like and subscribe so you don't miss any of that. And yeah, look for it, folks. Next week, we are going to be getting our Patrick Swayze on with Steel Dawn. So look forward to all our folks, our live folks who came in and checked us out during the live stream. Appreciate you. And until next time, we'll just say good night, everyone.
Oh, and vote in the rondos. Vote